Hi everyone, welcome to the Movieception Show. My name is Fariba, and today in this video I'll be doing a movie review on Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery. And just before I go into my review, I do want to address sort of my absence in the last few weeks. As you all know, it's just been a bit rough for me to really, keep up with the content on this channel, whether it be movie reviews or reaction stuff. And of course there hasn't really been any new TV shows to kind of close out things, so it's just really just the movie reviews I was hoping to had dropped persistently throughout the last few weeks. But as you all know, with the holidays it's just been a bit chaotic. For one thing, I do have a job, so I have to make sure that I do complete my assignments for those before I head into my vacation. And even though I've been, not working the last few days because I am on vacation now, I was also on vacation. Actually was like out of town the last few days with my family. So I didn't just, I wasn't able to really do any content until recently, like basically today. I just came back like 2 days ago from Georgia, and now I'm home hoping to, provide all my last minute content on this channel as much as I can before the end of the year, such as some of my movie reviews for some of the movies that came out in like this month, such as Avatar: The Way of Water, Glass Onion, which is this video, as well as hopefully Babylon. And then hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to do sort of my end of the year content, whether it be just a reflection of the year itself, as well as hopefully maybe compiling my top 10 movie list, something that I'm hoping I'll be able to do early on tomorrow. But yeah, definitely keep an eye on for that. And hopefully that will be a great way to just at least end off 2022 with some of these content for you. And then of course keep an eye out for 2023, things to look into, like anticipations, movies to look forward to, as well as just kind of my goals and resolutions for this channel. But that'll be all for 2023. So yeah, that's all the updates I have, and just kind of where my whereabouts in general and why I've been missing the last few weeks. Hopefully, you all understand. But yeah, I'm here now. Hopefully, able to, discuss everything that we all love, which is movies, TV shows, just the news that comes out of it, and discuss more of that. But yeah, without further ado, let's go right down into my review for Glass Onion. So, just to provide a little bit of context, because I know I didn't, this channel was not created until just early this year, and I never really got to give my review on Knives Out. Like, you probably don't even know how my feelings are about it, so I'm just gonna go dive into this. As we all know, Knives Out came out about 3 years ago, just before the pandemic. And I mean, for me, when Knives Out was coming out in 2019, I knew from an instant that, after having seen the trailer, that this was going to be a very special murder mystery movie. Like, for me, I have, for me, I personally love mystery films in general. That's just something that I enjoy. That's a genre that I enjoy a lot of. It kind of goes mixed into like the whole thriller genre. So that's really, this is where I really feel like I have a lot of like my interest in. And I feel like with the murder, like, with Knives Out, it definitely had the murder mystery stuff as well as the comedy. So it did feel like a different sort of murder mystery type of film that I was like, about to watch out of this. But I think with the amazing cast, as well as just, just the vibe that you get out of the Knives Out film, and from the trailers at least, I knew that just leading up to the film's release, that this was going to be a movie that I felt like personally I truly was going to enjoy. And I think in the end my expectations were met. I remember actually watching the first Knives Out movie on I believe it was an advanced screening, or it wasn't really an advanced screening, but it was just an early screening. Like, it was released a couple days earlier, I think just before Thanksgiving, and I was able to go see the film then with my mom, and we watched it, and I completely fell in love with Knives Out. Like, I think after watching that film, I just became completely obsessed with the Knives Out, like, world. And just, again, this is a film that I generally thought was, overlooked during the award season. I believe it did get a nomination, the Golden Globes, but that was just about it. But this was a film that I truly, truly, like, genuinely enjoyed, just because of how, hilarious it was, just kind of making you think about what's going on, making you just suspicious about each of the characters, and then just trying to make it just kind of felt like you were also immersed into the film as like a detective of yourself. And I felt like that really just enhanced the whole fun experience of what was Knives Out. And I think that that was just, again, one that I think that year in 2019 I may have marked as one of my top 3 films that year, maybe even my top, I think it was maybe even my number 1 film that year. But not absolutely sure. I'm not 100% on that, but there's a lot of great movies in 2019 in general. Like I think Endgame came out that year as well. So there's a lot of great movies that came out. I think even Parasite. So yeah, lots of great movies that came out in 2019. And yeah, that's just a general idea of just letting you all know like how I felt about Knives Out. Because again, this was a film that I genuinely loved. I'm so obsessive over it, and it's just like even to this day I still rewatch Knives Out just because of how fun and entertaining this movie is, in general as like a murder mystery, but with like a bit of like that comedy. And of course, again, it also started to become really trendy and all that. And I even remember as like somebody who was in love with this film, I did like a lot of things in college because I was in college at the time. But yeah, I did a lot of things with this movie in college. Even did like a film immersive experience, whatnot. And yeah, this was a film that I really just was like, I was like, I completely fell in love with. So when I heard that there was going to be a sequel, I mean, of course, like I think just like about any other person, there is kind of this skepticism about whether or not the sequel will be able to, meet up to the level of the original. That's always been the case. Like, I mean, for one thing, I was excited that there was going to be a sequel, but also it was kind of like it was going to be. It's kind of just like you have questions about how will they ever, or in this case, Rian Johnson would be able to, do a second film, and the whole purpose of the first film is just trying to be its own, murder mystery film. And what would that mean for the cast and all that sort of stuff. Of course, now we know that like the cast was going to be new for the sequel, and that the only character returning was going to be Detective Benio Blanc, which is played by Daniel Craig. And then of course Rian Johnson will return as director and writer for the sequel. And of course, like there was also that unexpected news that Netflix had bought the rights for the sequel, and I believe even for Knives Out 3 as well, which I'll talk about later in the video. But yeah, that was definitely a bit more of like the surprise factor that came out of it, is like the fact that Netflix bought the rights to the film. So there was definitely even more added skepticism about this, because I mean, for one thing, yeah, it's a sequel. How are you going to be able to you know meet the same level and expectations, or even exceed just sort of that experience that we got from the first film, right? Like I think that was like the number one big question of whether or not Rian Johnson will be able to do that. And I definitely felt like that was something that I was a bit concerned about going into the second film, just like, okay, well, how is he able to replicate the success of the first film and try to make it as enjoyable as possible? And then of course on top of that, you have the fact that Netflix has the rights to the sequel. So what does this mean in terms of the quality and the production value of this film? Like, is it going to dip from the first film? Will Netflix kind of make this exception? Because again, when we look at Netflix films, yeah, they do have some pretty good original films, and that's usually like movies that come during the latter half of the year. But in general, their content isn't the most prestigious. They're not really pristine. They're not the best quality films, and I think that again, that's a whole different discussion. I'll go and like that's a whole different discussion about Netflix. But again, that's kind of like a big discussion point that's been going on this year about just Netflix, and just kind of like how they're planning on trying to market their things or distribution, how they're gonna decide what show or movie to kind of move forward with, what not to go forward. And of course, again, like this year there's been lots of news about whether or not like what Netflix is planning on doing with their platform, how they're going to work towards that, knowing that again earlier this year there was like that whole crash with like the stock and how they lost so many subscribers. So there was a lot of big questions that were going on into Glass Onion, that it just kind of was this there was this trepidation of whether or not again this film was going to do well. But then regardless of that, I think when the trailer did drop for Glass Onion, I think that may have alleviated a lot of what I thought was kind of my concerns for the film. I think right off the bat, like when we got the first teasers, right, I think that a lot of us were like, okay, it kind of had like a Death on the Nile sort of vibe, or the Sheila film. I can't remember from the top of my head, but you know what Sheila film I'm talking about. And it did seem as if the sequel was going to at least be good, right? I think that with the cast that they did have, whether it be Dave Bautista, Janelle Monáe, or Edward Norton, like they're all pretty much great actors. And again, there was just a lot of questions about whether or not like will the story really translate into the cast that we have in this film, because the theme of the first one was just like discussing about elitism, just kind of this nepotism and family values and all that sort of stuff. And I think the big part was that it is about the family values. That's what made the first film such like a typical sort of murder mystery, but in a way that was very enhanced. And that really worked for a film like that, that had the murder mystery film that really fit well into kind of its own story. And then here we have Glass Onion, where we see a ship and less ship, sorry, a boat or yacht, and just kind of like a whole different cast where, they're more so friends than families. And then it's just like, okay, how will the murder mystery, like, where is the murder mystery sort of aspect of this film? And I think there was a lot of questions again about that and how that will be executed in this film. So yeah, and so there was a lot of questions, of course, and I think that that was just some of the concerns going into this film. For me, I actually did see this movie not on Netflix, but I actually saw this film back a month ago when it was in theaters for that limited week. And I'm let me just say that I'm glad I saw it in theaters. I think this is one of those cases where I really hope that Netflix learns from this experience, because honestly, this is a film that deserves to be in theaters. I think that the way that the experience of itself is that you're in a room with so many other people watching the same film, a movie that is about the murder mystery aspect of it. It is a murder mystery film, and yet the fact that it only was in theaters for a week, like, it was just a missed opportunity for so many people to go check it out in theaters. Because again, I think that this was a film that I thought was just amazing to watch on the big screen, and I think that that was again a miscue from Netflix. And I mean, I'm happy that a lot of people got to see it like last week when it finally did drop on Netflix. It became a huge discussing point. It became a trend on Twitter. A lot of people, fell in love with some of the characters, which I'm about to go into. But yeah, this is a film that I felt that should have, deserved to have a longer period in theaters. Because honestly, this is a film that I think, just from my reaction, it definitely met the expectations of the first film. Or in some ways, in ways that it did better than even in the first film. Although I will discuss again kind of just my preference of which of the two I like in the end. But yeah, this film overall, yes, it honestly met the expectations. It met the level of what was Knives Out. Like, there wasn't, I think that with the way that Rian Johnson was able to execute the story, like, you can see kind of this just style that he uses, that he actually repeats in this film from the first film, and yet doing so in a way that it still feels like a different movie. I think without a doubt, when we look into this film, right, again, it's nice to see Daniel Craig once again just having his you know over the top southern accent, and just like seeing him just being on the big screen again as Detective Blanc, and just kind of seeing a different you know, the sort of character that we saw him from Knives Out. I think that we start to see a bit more of a personal side to him in this film than we did in the first film. And I think that again, I feel like, again, this is going to be a movie where, or not a movie, but a series where we're going to start kind of seeing more and more of Blanc. I think he's going to kind of be the center of it. Not the center, but he's going to be a big part of this franchise. Knowing that, again, we're probably going to get Knives Out 3, which I'll discuss again in the end of this video. But yeah, going into just my review itself, this was a film that I think, as you all know, this is actually not a Death on the Nile film or a Sheila film or anything like that. This is actually more so happening in an island where a group of friends come together to basically have their own sort of whodunit party, only to see that that whodunit, party goes wrong and an actual murder does take place, which is very interesting in a way that, it's like, it becomes a bit, it becomes sort of meta in a way, but it's not really. But this is a film that really goes deep into the whole friendship of everything, just kind of this manipulation. Again, a big part of that, continues on from the first film to this film is elitism, and just, again, this trust, and just, again, how everyone is just thinking about themselves. And that is a big part of what this film is, trying to convey. The same thing that we saw in the first Knives Out film, just discussing the whole themes and just the idea of elitism and just the people who are involved and what they think, and then just seeing that kind of translate it into the sequel, just doing similar things but also kind of doing other things as well. Whereas here, again, I think in the first film, again, I think everyone had their own faults, whereas in this film it's kind of like everyone had their own faults as well, but in this case there was a really true villain, which I'm about to discuss. So yeah, in this film, they're in an island. They're all trying to do a whodunit party, only to see that Blanc is actually not supposed to be in this party, and it's just, there's a lot of question marks that happen. But I think one of the great things about this film is that it really gives you a bit more of the background of what's going on, whether it be the characters, who they are, what their motives are, why they would do such a thing, why they would be guilty. It does do that. Um, and I think one of the things that really made this film such a, special film is that it's funnier. I think there's no other way to kind of describe it. I think we can all agree that I think the sequel, Glass Onion, it's funnier. I think that's the whole point of that. I feel like this film definitely had more of the comedy aspects than really just the murder mystery, because a lot of what was going on is just kind of, poking fun of elitism and just the manipulation and just what everyone's doing, kind of how they're involved. I felt like the first film was definitely more dedicated to like the murder mystery, just the genre itself, whereas this film was definitely more dedicated to just the more comedy aspects and just dissecting sort of the ideas of elitism and friendships and all that sort of stuff. And that was a big part of what this film is kind of trying to discuss. And I think that really worked what was going on here, because again, you do see sort of a similar style with the flashbacks that we see in this film, that Rian Johnson also did in the first one. Like the flashbacks was a big part of Knives Out, just to kind of give a context of what was going on and why some characters could be the suspects. Whereas here it's like we do have a flashback, but in a way that it gives us a bit more of a nuance of like a character, right? I think that when we do look into like the story itself, it really works. It really translates itself well into just again incorporating all the comedy into it. Like it is a very over the top film, because it really goes and dives into the more elitism, the more like the issues of social media, and just kind of again elitism is like a big part of this film, right? And I think that they do. I think for Rian Johnson, he does kind of go into a bit of a commentary of that. I think a lot of people have been discussing about whether or not this is sort of kind of poking fun of Elon Musk, which I won't go dive deep too much into, but it could make sense why, because of the character that Edward Norton plays. So yeah, let's go dive much more into this film. Yeah, let me just some more like performance aspects. I think that again, when I saw the film, for me the clear star was Janelle Monáe. I think once you do get into sort of like the plot twist of things, and where you start to connect everything and just understand what is going on and why the story is as it is, Janelle Monáe is a star. I think there's no doubt about that. I think when I saw that in theaters, I knew right away that like everyone's going to be talking about Janelle Monáe, but also just kind of her relationship uh with uh with Blanc was also great. I think that I think we saw a similar sort of you know relationship that we saw between Blanc and Martha in the first film. We sort of see similar, I feel like in this one there was definitely a bit more of like that friendliness between Janelle's character and Blanc. And when I mean by Janelle's characters, I mean she's playing technically two different characters because they're twins, right? So that's kind of the spoiler alert right there. So I'll probably put a spoiler alert in this film, in this in this video, and put that this is gonna be a spoiler review. But yeah, we see that she is playing twins, and of course, again, like one of the twins. I mean, the twist is that the one of the twins is actually dead. The one that who knows the friends, and it's actually the twin who's trying to get vengeance for her sister and trying to you know just to get justice, right? I think that was the whole point of what this film was going to be about. And so yeah, I mean, again, Janelle did a fantastic job. I think she was definitely the star. Daniel Craig did an amazing job as well. I think again he's been pretty consistent with playing Blanc. He's very enjoyable. He's very charismatic and charming, and I think that's one of the reasons why we love this character. I think this is such a huge uh way to kind of just move away from the James Bond character, because he is so well known for that. And now that we kind of see him as Detective Blanc, like we can see how he's having a lot more fun playing this character, and we definitely see this happening more and more as he is involved in this series, right? I'm not gonna take away the fact that, like, I mean, again, this whole cast did such an amazing job, like the same way that the original cast in Knives Out has done. I mean, this whole cast did such an amazing job, especially again, this is supposed to be like for them, this is supposed to amp up the whole comedy aspect of it. Again, this is a much funnier film, and I'll talk about right. The whole bit of it is like, supposed to be very comedic, right? So you have characters like Kate Hudson's Birdie, right? I think, oh my god, like I think we can all agree that she is hilarious, even though she does have her kind of her idiotic moments. I think that's what makes it really hilarious and funny. Like you really enjoy this character, even though again has her problems. She has made some very questionable things, but it's just kind of like showing how, like, she doesn't really think twice about it. And I think that's what really makes a lot of people enjoy her, because she doesn't really think about what she's doing, but also it's like, okay, well, we've all made those mistakes before, and that's what just makes her really hilarious and really, like, just a character you can really just, like, look up and be like, yeah, I enjoy this character, even though there are some problematic things about it, but that doesn't become too much of an issue in this case. And then of course we have Catherine Hahn. Again, I mean, any role that she takes on, she's always 100%, right? I mean, she did such an amazing job in this film as well. Again, like, because Janelle Monáe was a big part of the story, that I think that she is the highlight of this film. I think Catherine Hahn also did such an amazing job as well. I think Dave Bautista also did a great job with playing his character Duke. I think this is I know that, considering that he is a former wrestler, he's definitely one of those, rising actors in a way that who has really, challenged just his versatility and his acting range. And I've seen him in Blade Runner 2049. He did such an amazing job in this film. And again, we're seeing a different side of the Batista, where it's like, yes, he is a funny character again, like in the way that he did in Guardians of the Galaxy as Drax, but in this case, we definitely see a bit more of this macho man type of guy, and he really nails it. And I think, again, he does an amazing job as well. And again, we just cannot forget about Edward Norton. I think that he does what he always can, right? I mean, he's always, you know, giving his A+ performance whenever he's taking on any role, especially someone as villainous as Miles. I think he also did such a great job with trying to portray this character as somebody, who's showing himself as like the good friend who's doing the good deeds, only to see that he's actually a very manipulative a-hole who only cares about himself. And he does such a great job just showing that, just that dimensionality of this character, that, well, yeah, he shows up as this one character who everyone, phrases and will defend, only to see that, well, he's just an a-hole who has, no idea of how to make up, trying to be original and just the things that he does. And I think that was just an hilarious thing that Rian Johnson does with this whole film, is just to really portray this character as somebody who has no originality. And I think that was the most hilarious thing when you get to the end of the film, that, well, this guy just cannot think of his own ideas, right? But yeah, that was just kind of the case of just the performances. I think the performances are top notch. I think, again, like, that was probably one of the things that really made this film so great, is the performances itself, that they really just, everyone's giving their A+ performance. Again, I think the shining star of this film is without a doubt Janelle Monáe, as well as Daniel Craig just being the, the second of that. But again, Janelle Monáe just a great job of playing just, like, Helen, and trying to show different sides of her and how she's trying to, like, it's like once you get to that, reveal, like, you can start to see more of Helen in her, even though she is trying to show herself as Cassandra as well, or Cassie, or Cass. And again, like, she does, again, I think she was just top notch in this film, and I hope that maybe there'll be more, accolades going towards her, because, again, I don't think she was nominated for a Golden Globe for this film, which is really a big snob, because I think she was definitely the shining star of this film. But hopefully we'll see how the award season goes. I don't think there's going to be much going towards her, just because, again, like, there are a lot of things going on with the award season, and there is a lot of great performances, but without a doubt, Janelle Monáe did such an amazing job at that, and that's just something I wanted to call out for. But yeah, aside from that, this is a film that, again, I think I've said this before, it's funnier, it's over the top, it's poking fun of the elitism, even just kind of alluding a little bit to just sort of the real life of everything, like, just like, how we have the conglomerates, we have the, the people who are high in power, the elites, the oligarchs, everything like that, right? And how everyone's trying to benefit for themselves. And that was a big part of this film. I think that with everything that happened with the whole comedy aspects, where I felt like was the, the more, I felt like this film definitely had a lot more going on. I think that was the one aspect where this film does so much better than the first film, which is the comedic aspects, the humor, and all that sort of stuff. As I said before, I think that this film felt more like a comedy than really a murder mystery, whereas Knives Out was definitely more of a, murder mystery with a touch of comedy, right? So in this case, I felt like, so as much as the fact that I did enjoy this film, there are definitely some flaws to it. So for one thing, I think there's, without a doubt, I think we can say that I think for me personally, I felt like this film was pretty predictable. I think the moment that we arrived at the island, I knew right away who the suspect was, or who the murderer was, and that was, of course, Miles, I think like they're literally, you can look at like Miles's face and the way that he looks in shock. I think that was just a really dead giveaway of like, well, he's of course obviously the murderer in this case, right? That was where I kind of felt like, okay, this is where the film kind of dips a little bit, just because again it is very predictable, just because of the way it is styled. Because again, they go into the flashback more so leading all the way back to just you know this plot twist that again that Helen is the twin sister of Cass, and therefore this is actually more of a revenge sort of film than really a murder mystery film. I think that takes away more of like what this one should have been, which is the murder mystery genre of itself. Because again, it was very predictable just because of the way that they tried to execute, or again, Johnson tried to execute the story, and that is that, well, this is more so a trying to catch Miles red-handed and trying to prove that he is the murderer, rather than just like trying to investigate who the suspects really are, which I felt like that was kind of where it kind of dipped a little bit in terms of the murder mystery aspect. Because the whole point of murder mystery is that you don't know who the murderer is, right? And typically you wouldn't know until like the end of the film, which I think it's fine that Johnson kind of gave away who it is, like more so in the middle of the film, just because it kind of changes sort of the pacing a little bit. Again, it allows Johnson to really elevate the more of the comedic aspects of this film, which again I think that was just beautifully done. I don't think I mean, I laughed more at this film than I did in the first film, but because it is sort of marketed as like a murder mystery type of film, again, literally its subtitle is a Knives Out mystery, right? So I think that does take away the fact that the way the film was executed, it takes away sort of that murder mystery aspect of what this film should have been. Like, it made it a bit too predictable, and I think that's what took the story away a little bit. It's like, okay, well, because you had to sacrifice the twist of it, that it does kind of make this film a bit more predictable, more so just like entertainment, and just how everything kind of you know just where the outcome is going to be by the end of this film. But yeah, without a doubt, again, this was a film that again, aside from the predictability, I think that again it's fun. I think that's what the whole point of this film is. There were a lot of great moments, a lot of fun moments. There's definitely like one line from Janelle Monáe where she says something about like the kombucha thing with Jared Leto. That was freaking hilarious. The ending part with the Mona Lisa, that was definitely a true high moments that we saw from Helen. That was a lot of great sequences that we saw from the ending of the film. There was definitely a lot more action in this type of film, and just kind of being a bit more clever in terms of just how Blanc and Helen tried to deceive some of the whole group, and trying to get to the bottom of what happened, and just understanding how to understand, like, not just understand, but just to just to get to the point of what this Bench of Stories is. And I think that this is kind of those rare cases where, like, even though Helen doesn't get the justice that she wanted, at least she was able to get the payback. And I think this film really does a great job with the payback aspect of it, because again, like, for a film that is about elitism and how people in power are always getting away with whatever they want, this is a film that really does kind of a different aspect of that. Like, I mean, the first film, yeah, Ransom gets caught, he's going to jail, even though he is he comes from a rich family, whatnot, right? And that was it for that. But here it's like, okay, well, there's a bit more of that complexity of like how things are going to go, kind of showing how like some of the characters are conflicted around like the whole group, whether it be Catherine's character, Leslie Odam's character, all of them, right? And I think we do see a lot of that. But again, I think the fun part of it is that there is so much of this humor, just this dynamic between everybody, that I think that really takes it up a notch a little bit from Knives Out. I think that's where, like, I think in a way I love and appreciate the fact that the sequel is, even though it is a sequel to Knives Out, it tries to be its own thing. And I do credit that for Rian Johnson for really trying to show a different sort of story that isn't repeating itself. Because I think one of the problems we typically see kind of this sophomore slump, whether it be a series or a film franchise, because sometimes like they don't know really, and a lot of like these creators don't know where to kind of take this story. But in this case, Rian Johnson knew where he wanted to take this story. He knew they had to make it different from just this family sort of feud type, and try to make it more focused on like a group of so-called friends who are not really friends because they're afraid of just one person, right? And so it's all about manipulation, again, discussing more the racism and all that sort of stuff, but also taking it up a notch, trying to be a bit more over the top, funny, and all that sort of stuff. But in terms of just kind of like how I would compare this to the first film, again, without a doubt, it's funnier, it's over the top, it's fun, it's very, unique in a sense that like it does show a different sort of murder, not murder mystery, but definitely sort of this different dynamic that we typically wouldn't see in a murder mystery type of film or mystery film in a sense. um and again, I think that there was definitely a bit more plot holes in this one, like nothing, it's just a couple nitpicky stuff, but like nothing too big. But I do believe in my preference that Knives Out is slightly better than this one. Slightly. I think that both of them are great in their own ways because I do enjoy the comedy aspects that we do see in this film in Glass Onion. I just feel like as somebody who, as considering that this is a film that is being marketed as like a mystery film or particularly murder mystery, I felt like the first film really just, does a better job of doing that. It accomplishes sort of what it's intended to be, which is a murder mystery film. So it's like, okay, well, you have like a detective, he's called in, there's a potential, foul play. Uh, Therefore, there's going to be, investigation. Now we need to decide, who we need to figure out who it is that, I, basically killed, I believe it was Harry Trumbe or something like that. Something like that. It's been a while since I've watched Knives Out. But it was definitely Trumby. And Harlan, sorry, it was Harlan Trumby. There you go. Harlan Trumby. And trying to understand, okay, because the thing is, at least in the first film, everyone had their own, motives for it, whether it be Walt, whether it be Ransom, could have been Martha as well, because again, like we saw again what happened earlier on, like she would have been guilty only for the fact that, she, it was kind of malpractice, and that was of course not the case. We saw in the end of the film that was not the case. She was actually a very good nurse, but there could have been a manslaughter in her case, right? And that's where it's like, okay, well, now you're kind of doubting everybody, and it's like, okay, you're having second thoughts about who, the murderer could have been. I mean, I think for the most part, a lot of us knew that Ransom was sort of the murderer, but I think the more you progress into the film, you definitely start to have a bit more doubt about it, especially because, again, the whole Martha revelation where, she accidentally, or she thought she accidentally injected the wrong medication to Harlan, and therefore, like, she could just be in much of deep trouble as anybody else in the family, right? So that's why she wasn't cleared off until, like, of course, the end of the film, and that's where we do see Ransom is the actual murderer. But yeah, I mean, again, like, I feel like that film really did, like, the murder mystery part its justice, just because it is it does hit the nails of what is supposed to be a murder mystery. Whereas in this film, Glass Onion, it's, again, as I said before, it's less of a murder mystery film and more so of a comedy. And I think in a sense you can add vengeance a little bit into the story, because again, this is coming from Helen's perspective, and in a sort of way, like, this is her story, this is how she's trying to get back at Miles and trying to get justice for her sister. And I think that was a big part of what this film is. Like, I felt like this was more so like a revenge sort of comedy film than really a murder mystery, or in a sense mystery film. And I think that that's where I think that in this case Knives Out is slightly better in that sense, because Knives Out definitely hit the marks of what is supposed to be murder mystery, whereas this one did not entirely do it. But again, it doesn't take away the fact that this film is not fun. I think this is a great, great film. I think Rian Johnson again does a spectacular job with nailing another mystery film that a lot of us were kind of having doubts about, we're having questions about, and yet Johnson really just does a great job of just meeting those expectations and doing so in a way that's still different and making it so unique from the first film and letting it be its own film as well, while also still bringing back Blanc. Again, there's a couple of things that didn't really make sense in the film. As I was saying about some of the plot holes, like for one thing, like when did Miles ever, because again, in the end of the film, it was revealed that the idea of the blackout and the lights going out was an idea from Blanc. But it's like, okay, well, if he sold the idea, when did he have the time to set up the blackout? Because he was always with Blanc from that discussion onward. So it's like, okay, when did this happen? Like, how did they set that up? A lot of questions about that. Another question being like, okay, well, if Miles and Cass were having already had like this issue between themselves to a point where they even went to court regarding their company. Like, why would he still send her a murder mystery, like not murder mystery, but a puzzle box to her? And like, you would think that somebody who you and like you tarnish their friendship with, that the last thing you would do is try to invite her to your party where she literally despises you for what you've done, right? And then that part, some of these things that there's something, a couple of things that just didn't really make sense, and I felt like was a bit convoluted and trying to set up the story, which again I think that's where I felt like this film kind of is a bit, it doesn't really compare. I mean, again, I feel like Knives Out is a lot better in terms of this film, because again, I feel like Knives Out is a bit more consistent and it's just trying to, putting the story together and putting the points together. Whereas here it's like some parts, like of course, like the puzzle box, a blackout, some of those things, itty bitty stuff, I felt like were a bit convoluted and were just kind of, I want to say forced, but it just, there wasn't like it just didn't circle back into like explaining of how things worked and how it kind of led to sort of point A to point B, and that just kind of led to a little bit more of this confusion of like, okay, well, if this happens, like if you start to like think more so just the deep dive of like what happened in the film, you start to kind of catch on like, okay, well, this is a great film, but there are some issues which sort of like the logic of some of the things that happen in the film. I think that was, again, some of the things I started to start to pick on and trying to notice a lot more in this film than I did in Knives Out. So again, I think that's where I think I would prefer. I think both great. Again, both films are great. Knives Out, I think, is where I would say is still my favorite between the two, just because again it is more of a murder mystery and does kind of put the pieces together better. And I think that even then, like, I think in that film there was definitely a lot more of like the, not the Easter eggs, but the hidden details that really make the film, like the original film, just feel so amazing and unique. And it's like it definitely has that bit of like detective investigative feel to it, whereas this film, again, like, because it is aiming more of that comedic aspect, there are some things that had to be sacrificed, such as like being a bit more predictable, some of the story kind of just like feeling a bit unnatural, not as organic as it should be. But regardless, it's still a really funny film that had a great dynamic between the characters. Everyone just did such a great job in the film. And again, I think when it comes to it, I think again Janelle Monáe Blanc and Daniel Craig did such an amazing job, as well as the rest of the cast, and just making this such an amazing like Glass Onion film. And just again, like just again, just kind of, I mean, it's really hard to describe. Like, I mean, it just, again, I think at the end of the day, when you do get to the end of the film, it is definitely kind of that, hurrah moment. Like, okay, well, even though things didn't go in, Helen's way, she still did get her justice. And it just definitely was kind of like a chef's kiss in the end, that there's still sort of like that big moment that really kind of, in the end of the day, makes you feel a bit satisfied with what was the outcome, even though the outcome wasn't as they would have wanted it to be. And I think that's where this film does a great job on doing that as well. And I think, again, I did enjoy Glass Onion. This is a great film. I think that when it comes to the whole Knives Out series in general, I think Johnson has really nailed it with not just the first film, but the second film as well. I mean, it has basically reached the like the expectations of the first film, and doing so in ways that it's very different and making it so enjoyable in its own way. And I think that's what made this film so special, and that's why I personally enjoy Glass Onion. I mean, even to this day, even though like there are some issues with kind of like some of the plot situation and the logic of some of the storylines, I'm still enjoying it. I've been rewatching it on Netflix. I've been rewatching some of the scenes that were, hilarious, whether it be the beginning where they were trying to uncover the box, or the kombucha scene, or when Helen, the ending scene where she basically, basically defeats Miles in the best way possible. Again, it's such an amazing film. I loved it. I truly, truly enjoyed it. I think there's really, I mean, again, there's going to be a lot of comparisons going on, but it's also kind of going to apples and oranges. I think, again, I think the way that Johnson has done it, he's done such a great job that I'm really super excited for, whenever Knives Out 3 comes out. There's definitely a lot of questions as to what the third film is going to focus on. I believe he already said that he's not doing a prequel or anything like an origin story for Blanc. That's not going to happen. So I think that's for the best anyways, just because the whole point of the series is to just have this fun aspect of going into a mystery sort of story and just uncovering things, right? And just seeing how things kind of work out. I think without a doubt we're probably going to see Blanc, so basically Daniel Craig returning in the third film. Definitely lots of questions as to what, as to how Johnson is going to execute the next story, because the first film was taking place in a house with a family. The second film was, at an island with a group of friends during a whodunit party that goes wrong. So what is this third film going to be about? I have no idea. Of course, I mean, he's already done two big stories. That's like, okay, well, how will he, you know, how will he execute the third film? How he's gonna do it differently? There's going to be a lot of questions about that, as well as the cast. Because again, I'm expecting that aside from Daniel Craig, and maybe I believe that one actor, I can't remember who, but the one who played Daryl or something, he actually was in the first film as well, who played the police cop. So we probably will see that actor again, probably in a different role though, because that seems to be sort of the theme so far that I've been seeing with this actor. So we're probably gonna see him again. I can't remember his name, but probably see him again. Aside from them two, I don't believe anybody else will be returning from the looks of it. So we're probably gonna get a brand new cast for Knives Out 3. Definitely look forward to seeing what's gonna happen then. I believe Netflix does have the right to the third film. So I hope that maybe Netflix may have learned a lesson from this and maybe, take the opportunity to, put these films in theaters for a longer period before, putting into streaming. Like, just a similar way that HBO Max does it, just do it that way. I feel like that's a very doable way to do it. That's actually a more efficient way to do it. Hopefully then they'll get their act together. But aside from that, truly love Glass Onion. I for what it was, definitely hilarious. I hope you have seen it. But yeah, that's all I would like to say about this. But let me know what you think. Have you seen Glass Onion? Did you see it in theater? Did you see it on Netflix? What are your thoughts about it? How do you feel about this film in comparison to the first film? Did you prefer Glass Onion, or did you still prefer Knives Out, the original film? What are things that you feel about this film that did great, that the other film did not, and vice versa? And what are your thoughts about, what Knives Out 3 is going to be, whether you have any predictions or theories about what Rian Johnson has in stores for Knives Out 3? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe.